Good morning. It's Market Day Report. I'm Tony St. James. Okay, we've got in the studio Tommy Grisafi. We'll talk with him in just a moment. On the heels of the Federal Reserve cutting interest rates by 50 basis points, and that's a pretty big cut, but I've got some news from outside of the U.S. that makes that kind of pale in comparison. That's coming up a little later this morning, though. Jobless claims out, and the initial numbers below the trade expectations. The continuing numbers below expectations as well. Maybe the problem, though, is every week we get revisions on previous numbers, so whether or not we can count on these yet or not, we don't know. But they are numbers that came out this morning. Speaking of numbers, how about we go to the market and look at the numbers for corn. 3.5 lower as we open up December at 409 1/4. And what about soybeans? Soybeans have been higher in the morning session. November up a couple of pennies at 10.16. We're within 2 pennies of the day's high, 3 cents higher on May and July. Let's go to the wheat market. And kind of a disappointing week for export sales, down 48% week over week, according to USDA, and 46% below the 4-week average. Chicago, December off 6, 569 3/4, and even the July trading lower. December in Kansas City, 571 1/4, down 7 1/4. July, 7 1/4 lower, 596 3/4. Spring wheat Minneapolis trading 609 a bushel. That's down 7 1/2. And the cotton market got a bump in overnight trade. December trying to hold on to that 71.53 up 26. Tommy Grisafi's with Advanced Trading. Okay, Tommy, starting with that rate cut, the equities have responded.
Yeah, initially they responded positively yesterday, closed lower. They digested that quickly. The world's moved on. We've been trending up all night. We're open now. Both the Dow Jones and the NASDAQ are up 500. When you look at the corn and wheat and bean board, it's just business as usual. It's harvest. You're seeing harvest pressure. Major moves in gold. Gold hit all-time highs yesterday. I know I was listening to you driving down here. You spoke about that. And so there's a lot of moving parts. If you dial it in and say, what's it mean to agriculture? What's it mean to a corn farmer or someone with cattle? Operating loans went down. The cost of money went down. People are looking for a home for that money. We have to understand, we didn't go down to where we were 3-4 years ago. We just went down a half. So we went up a lot. It would take a lot of 50 basis point cuts to get back to where we are. So if you're a saver, you're making a little less. If you're a borrower, you're paying a little less. Should spur the housing market. And anytime the housing market's booming, America's booming. So you're seeing a really positive effect in the stock market. Now, a lot of people said if they cut a half, the markets are going to crash. Obviously, I'm here to tell you that's not true. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on Cow Guy Close.
Okay. I'm glad you mentioned how that could apply to farmers as well. Let's look at crude oil futures here in the morning trade. And this is on the heels of an EIA report that came out. And again, just seeing a drawdown in stocks again. Much more than what the trade had anticipated. But crude oil now moving higher on the October, up 73 at 71.64. Again, you pulled the interest rate back, and if we see crude start sliding back as well, input prices, you can expect, would go down at least a little.
Well,
not much, but a little.
I do have several friends in the seed industry, and they said they're going to have a hard time telling their clients that the price of seed didn't go down, even though corn went down. Fertilizer didn't go down. A lot of things didn't go down, and that is the tax and cost of the higher lag of inflation. Major ag companies or any companies not just going to look at, there's a rate cut, let's lower prices, right? They will charge as much as the market can tolerate, just like you'll sell your house for as much as the market will tolerate. So it takes, like the Fed, Jay Powell said yesterday, we're cutting rates today. It could take 12 to 18 months to take effect.
Okay, you talk about interest rates. We talk about inflation. We're going to talk more about inflation outside of the U.S. as well. But first, let's take a break. We'll come back and talk cattle with Tommy Grisafi. Market Day Report continues in a moment. Good morning. It's Market Day Report. Coming up tomorrow, 2 o'clock Central Time, Cattle on Feed Report. We'll talk more about that throughout the day. First, let's go to the cattle market. We're trading now with live cattle futures in higher territory. The October up 30 at 178.60. December 12.5 higher at 179.97. And for the feeders, we're higher as well. 4 dimes higher on the September. October, the most active, up 70 at 240.65. Even $1.07 higher on the January. And the hog trade has been in higher territory most of the week. October down 20 at 81.85, but December 17 higher at 74.02. Let's bring back in Tommy Grisafi with Advanced Trading. What are you looking at on the proteins?
Well, we got some good news, right? The rate cut will benefit those guys. It costs an incredible amount of money to produce a pound of any type of protein right now. They are in the, it's favorable for them that commodities like corn and soybean meal are lower. They're enjoying that. Not everyone wants higher corn prices, as you know. There's 2 sides to that story. Overall, the chart action looks good in cattle, and the cash market's still doing well. The fundamentals are there. Everyone's afraid the shoe's going to drop because it dropped when we came into the year, December, January period. We had another big break on some news in cattle, but the fundamentals are kicking in, and the charts are looking good. We'll keep our fingers crossed, but that is not a marketing plan. That is not risk advisory. That's just hope. And the cattlemen, they're cattle guys, right? They take a lot of risk. Both boys and girls in that industry. Starting to meet a lot more women in the cattle industry.
Sure. We use the analogy, you can ask somebody to dance, but they have to say yes or no. And if we're using that analogy, the asking price right now for cash cattle, $185, but the bids are $179. At some point in time, we're going to find out what cattle are worth this week. Earlier, you mentioned inflation and how inflation affects all of us. Central Bank of Turkey is holding their interest rates steady at 50%. 50%. For their interest rates. The headline inflation in Turkey has come down to 52% from 75%. What's their goal? 5%. They've got a long ways to go.
They do.
Wow. Puts things in perspective for us, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And so, again, you can look at another country and say, okay, can we learn some things from that? So just keep in mind, as rough as it might seem for us, we're not turkeys.
Yeah. Grateful to live in the greatest country
Yeah,
in the
policy and
world.
politics matter, even though it's hard to talk about. But we'll do it.
That's it. Thanks for that update, guys.